Welcome to Football Never Sleeps, the aspiring to be viral, over-caffeinated, white pants-approving weekly YouTube show all about Notre Dame football and the fashion statements it's making on its way to an appearance in the first-ever 12-team version of the college football playoff. I'm the vacationing Eric Hansen. Just kidding, I'm not on vacation. I'm the regular version myself. And he's Tyler James, the jet-lagged and Cyber Monday bargain-hunting version of himself, and will soon both be under siege from lake effect snow. Speaking of that and the college football playoff, we'll break down which lucky teams are in the running to experience our Arctic weather and frozen tundra the weekend before Christmas. We'll also discuss and maybe even argue about which matchups might be the most favorable for Notre Dame. We've got injuries to talk about, speculation to speculate about, recruiting news to share, and above all, your questions, comments, and compliments. They're all ahead on Football Never Sleeps.
That intro music did me some good. I'm running on a little sleep, so much appreciate the little jump start to our Football Never Sleep show. As you should know by now, Football Never Sleep is presented by MyBookie. The NFL season certainly has been a wild ride, and my Chicago Bears are already looking for a new head coach after a Thanksgiving Day debacle. There's still plenty of season left for fans of other teams, and favorites are cashing in at a historic rate this season. I've been using MyBookie all season, and it's been paying off big time. If you're looking for a place to start, let me tell you about a little cheat code, Risk-Free Thursdays. Every Thursday, you can take advantage of a no-pressure bet that is there to help you build up your bankroll. Just look under the Bet Boost tab in the sportsbook, and you'll find it. It's basically a free shot at some extra cash, and who couldn't use that around the holidays? You've heard me talking about MyBookie for weeks now, and you may still be wondering why MyBookie, and it's because they make it easy for us to bet smart and bet big. It's not about praying for random parlays. It's about finding value and making plays that make sense. And if you want a change of pace, you can even hit up the live casino. And for those of you who haven't jumped in yet, use our promo code INDS on your first deposit, and they'll double your money instantly. Bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie, and may the luck of the Irish be with you. All right. You only have a few hours left to take advantage of our Cyber Monday deal. Promo code for that is Rivals24 for 75% off the first year of an annual subscription to InsideNDSports.com. There's going to be plenty to follow with the early signing period, the transfer portal opening up, and Notre Dame's college football playoff run. And if you sign up now, you'll be covered all the way through the end of next year's regular season. So this is the best time to sign up. That's our best deal of the year. There's a link to sign up in the video description below, and the promo code is Rivals24. Also, make sure you're subscribed to us here on YouTube, which is free. Appreciate everyone chiming in tonight. Jeff, Brian, Outbound, T. Dawson, Steel Horseman. Good to see a lively chat tonight. Don't be shy. We want to hear your questions as well. So make sure you're participating, and let's have a good show.
Where do they subscribe at? Where's in the notifications? Is it on our screen or not? Is it we just can't see it?
There should be a subscribe button on YouTube. I don't know where. I don't have it in front of me to know the what it looks like. But yeah, there should be just a subscribe button. I think it's below our talking heads.
Well, Brian's got us off and running. He said, rename the show Tyler Never Sleeps.
Sometimes that feels true, but we'll be all right tonight. Plenty of energy coming off of Notre Dame's big 49-35 win over USC, which assured that the Irish will be in the first 12-team college football playoff, and they'll be hosting a first-round game in Notre Dame Stadium. We'll find out how that all plays out next Sunday. But there will be one more rankings release for us to talk about and speculate about this coming Tuesday. Eric, do you think that this is the week that Notre Dame jumps Penn State in those college football playoff rankings?
I don't think so, and this is why. I think that had Ohio State won and Penn State was not in the Big Ten championship game, the committee really would have put a lot of energy in determining which of those teams deserve to be ahead of each other. But I think with Penn State playing in the Big Ten championship game, they feel like that will define Penn State a little bit more. where Notre Dame's in the clubhouse. So that's why I do not think they will jump Notre Dame. I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen. I just say it's a lot less likely.
Yeah, I think they should, but yeah, I don't have confidence that the committee will.
Well, I think they should, yes.
And like I think there's reason to be patient because it's all going to sort of play out. You get to see what the Big Ten championship game will do for Penn State. The Army game, I people might scoff at it being the AAC championship, but if Army wins that, I think that bolsters Notre Dame's resume as well. And so those are important pieces to the puzzle that we'll get answers to soon enough. So whether or not Notre Dame jumps Penn State this week, we could still see that coming on Sunday. So do you think it matters if Notre Dame passes Penn State this week? Does that mean anything?
No, I don't, because if there's, I think, a assumption by a lot of people in our business that the teams that lose in the conference championship games aren't going to drop at all. I don't think they'll drop precipitously, but I think they will drop by losing, especially if it's not a competitive game between Penn State and Oregon. And then if Penn State wins, they should be ahead of Notre Dame, and they will be. And then Oregon will probably be 2 in the both the standings and the seedings. So that's the way that I think it'll play out.
All right. And then what should Notre Dame fans be rooting for this coming weekend in the conference championship games to ensure the best seeding for the Irish?
Okay. So there are 9 conference championship games this weekend, and I think 6 of them indirectly at least affect Notre Dame and its possible seeding, its possible pairing, and its possible perception. And I think the one over all others is Oregon over Penn State.
Yeah.
That way you don't have both of those teams maybe seated above Notre Dame. You'd only have one of them. And I think Oregon as a possible semifinal matchup isn't the end of the world. I think they're really good. They're undefeated. But if you look at the matchups, what Oregon does well and the few things it doesn't do well, Notre Dame matches up against them better than some of the other teams. So Oregon over Penn State. My second one would be Iowa State over Arizona State. There's a chance that the 12 seed will be the Big 12 champion, especially if it's Iowa State. They won't be able to get high enough unless there's also an upset or if there's an upset in the Mountain West Conference. Iowa State and Arizona State, it's not just because I have Iowa State ranked lower, but when you look at the matchups, Iowa State is just about the easiest team to play, I believe, in the field, even more than UNLV. Notre Dame matches up against Iowa State better. The next game I think Notre Dame fans should be rooting for, you alluded to it, Army over Tulane in the AAC. The committee really draws a line over whether you're in the top 25 or not. They don't speculate who would be 26 through 30. Mm-hmm. Right now, for instance, in the AP poll, guess who's 26 and 27 are? Texas A&M and Louisville. So if those teams aren't in the top 25 and Army isn't, then Notre Dame suddenly doesn't have a top 25 victory. And if you're splitting hairs between teams, that could come into play. Then I think we're getting less consequential as we get down this list. Clemson over SMU, I think you do that just because you'd rather have, I think Clemson's the weaker of those two teams. Obviously, if they beat SMU, they can make a claim that they're better. But I think Notre Dame's better matchup would be Clemson if they ran into them in the playoff. UNLV over Boise. I'll tell you what, UNLV is better than people think they are. Statistically, they're better than Boise in a lot of things. They're actually a better rushing team than Boise, and they're definitely a better passing team, and they're better defensively. Where Boise is not a good matchup for Notre Dame is Ashton Genty, who's the best running back in the country. Even though UNLV, they have a quarterback that can run and good running backs, Boise has Genty, who will be relentless. And then the last, I would say Georgia over Texas, just because if Georgia loses, you don't want them falling into that 11-12 range in the seedings, and Notre Dame have to play them in a first-round game. I think that's still a favorable matchup for Notre Dame, Georgia. But if you can avoid them in the first round, you'd rather play them a little bit later on if they're still in it.
So I was worried from the Notre Dame perspective that if Texas loses again to Georgia, that it could still stay ahead of Notre Dame. Do you think that's not possible?
I don't think so. I don't think with 2 losses, and then Texas doesn't have a top 25 win if Texas A&M isn't in the, and those are pretty comparable scores. They both teams won in College Station. You know, the Irish faced the really good running back Moss, who's injured and out. So Texas A&M wasn't maybe at as full strength as they were. Different quarterback when they played, but it was a quarterback choice, not an injury related for Texas and Texas A&M. I don't think Texas stays ahead unless Ward Manuel goes, gosh darn it, they beat Michigan and Michigan beat Ohio State.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. Like losing to the same team twice, I think you could write off as like, maybe that's just a bad matchup for that team. But then also, like, we're not really sure how much they're going to punish teams that lose in the conference championship game. So those are the things that would be potentially concerning in terms of, okay, making sure that if Georgia wins, that Texas does fall behind Notre Dame. But either way, the difference between a 5 and the 6 seed, I don't think it's that drastic with the way things have played out, because I don't think
it's not
the 3 seed or the 4 seed is going to be that significantly different than from each other. Other than I think the 12 seed is, as long as it's not like
I think SMU is better than all those other teams. So if SMU wins the ACC, I think they're better, but I don't think it's like playing Oregon next,
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So who are the teams in play if Notre Dame is a 5 or 6 seed as expected?
So I came up with 11 of them.
Oh, geez, Eric.
and I have ranked them in order from best matchup to worst matchup. Now, some of these,
all right, bring it.
I wanted to have them in there just in case, because I don't know how the committee's going to look at that cluster of Alabama, South Carolina, Ole Miss, for example. And I'm also factoring in Boise State losing, Georgia losing, Miami maybe still being in the top 12. A lot of people think the committee's been ranking them higher, that they may stay in the top 12. So here's me going from most favorable matchup to least favorable. And funny, 2 out of the 3 least favorable, I don't think will be in the field. Okay. Number 1, easiest, Iowa State. 2, UNLV. 3, Clemson. 4, Boise State. 5, Arizona State. 6, Miami. 7, Alabama. 8, Georgia. 9, South Carolina. 10, Indiana. And 11, Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss is the worst matchup for Notre Dame based on what Ole Miss does well. Even though they have some bad losses, they match up very well with what the Irish do.
Based on the trash talk that Charlie Weiss Sr. had earlier this season on our podcast, when he said, you better hope they don't play against Ole Miss.
Well, Ole Miss, they just have to worry that they don't face an unranked team. That's their problem, is beating the teams that they should beat. The teams that they're not supposed to beat, they're pretty good. I mean, they're really good defensively, and they have a quarterback that can do what the USC quarterback did, except at a better efficiency and with better receivers, where they can just bring waves of receivers at Notre Dame's 2 corners, who had to play 79 reps apiece in that game. But that's how it would go. I mean, certainly Miami's not likely to be in that mix. Georgia, South Carolina, Ole Miss, probably
we just
not.
We just don't know which one. There's probably one that maybe, and we just don't know which one it is.
We just don't know which one yet.
And we'll get an answer to that on Tuesday, though, right? I would imagine
we'll get more clarity. But we'll get more clarity on that. We won't know
right
until Georgia and Texas played if Georgia slides down far enough to get to 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Which I don't think they will. But I think people are overestimating what the committee's going to do with conference championship losers. And this is the first year it's been consequential. Before you had 4 teams, and Notre Dame was able to stay in the Final Four, losing to Clemson in a rematch in the ACC championship game, if you remember back in 2020. But Notre Dame was undefeated. That's a little bit different. They dropped, obviously, but they didn't drop precipitously in that situation. And I think scoring margin has something to do with it too. I mean, you can't just say, well, they made the championship game and they lose 60-0. These teams are being rewarded with a bye for winning. I do think there should be a risk in playing in that game. Just because you made the championship game, I don't think should be risk-free if your reward is a possible first-round bye in a top 4 seed, when 2 of those teams at least won't deserve it.
All right. Next, I want to talk about injuries before we get into the questions, because I know there are some injury questions there, so I'll bring those up. Ron Robert asked, Tyler, have you heard the status of Jeremiah Love? Bob Oxnard asked, is Logan Thomas going to be healthy enough to help in the playoffs? So let's sort of recap where things are at in terms of injuries for Notre Dame. The good news is that Notre Dame has time to rest up, which will be important for a team that's been hit by so many injuries this season. We won't likely get any answers from Notre Dame on the status of players. But to me, there's 3 that are key players that we need to know more about. First is Howard Cross.
The 3.5. There's still the kicker too.
Howard Cross the third. How effective, Eric, do you think he can be after missing the last 3 games of the regular season?
I think he can. I think they can ease him back in terms of reps. I mean, they wouldn't say, okay, Howard, you got to play 60 reps in this first playoff game. Donovan Heinisch played a career high 64 against USC. His previous high was 39. And I don't think he was ever in the 30s before the last part of this season. So they have somebody that can put in a lot of reps, so they don't have to rely on Howard for volume, just quality. And, ankle injuries can be tricky. They're tricky enough that he practiced last week and didn't play this week. So I thought that he wouldn't play if there was injury risk, if there was a risk that he could further the injury and then be out for the playoff. I would think 3 weeks is enough for him to get back and be able to contribute in some way.
Yeah, I would think so. It's not ideal to be coming off such a long break, but I was fooled into thinking that he would play against USC, considering that he had practiced some. I read too much into the fact that he had practiced leading into the Army game. He did not look very spry when he was trying to give it a go in warmups prior to the game. But considering that they didn't play him, that should have increased the opportunity for him to fully heal in whatever ways that was necessary. So barring a setback in practice between now and then, I think it should be a good situation for Notre Dame with Howard Cross, even though it certainly wasn't without him in there against USC.
Well, we saw it early in the year. I mean, there's a big difference between Howard Cross at 100% and Howard Cross at not 100%.
Yeah, and because I like Howard Cross as a player, but he's someone that he doesn't have a ton of he gets. I think a lot of his work comes off of effort, and I think your effort can be inhibited by the health that you're at, and so
it's also that explosion. I mean, he had a hammy, and
right.
That ankle would do the same thing if you don't have that get off.
Right, he can't rely on just incredible strength to overcome that, or incredible size, because those aren't necessarily qualities that are at the top of his list. All right, the injury that came up during the game was running back Jeremiah Love. How serious do you think his right leg injury is? Do you have any insight there?
I don't, and I know Marcus isn't good. I mean, if Marcus is smart, he's not going to. And we're not due to talk to him anyways until after the pairings have been announced. But I mean, given what the committee did to Florida State last year, I wouldn't. If I were a coach, I wouldn't define that before. Even if it's good news, I wouldn't define it before the selection came out. I'd go ahead and talk to the media about it then. I mean, during the game, it was hard to tell if it was an ankle or a knee, and the TV crew wasn't giving us a whole lot of help. It does appear like it was a knee injury, and that makes it a little bit more ticklish than an ankle to me. But that's about all I'm willing to speculate at this point.
Yeah, I think barring something coming up in any sort of MRIs or testing that's happening today or this week, I think it's encouraging. Like, it seemed like he was close to going back in. Like,
it was encouraging that he was even trying that.
Right. So I don't think
they didn't have a priest over him or anything.
Right. So unless he had like incredible pain tolerance, that then they realized later, like, oh man, this is actually more serious than we thought. I think there's probably a chance he can play. I don't know. And like you said, it's unlikely that we would learn this week. Although I'm not sure if we're going to get to talk to Marcus Freeman on Wednesday for the signing day. I imagine they would ask us to not talk about the current team, but we have not learned what Notre Dame's plans are for signing day yet this week. Another injury is Kingston Viliamu-Asa. I saw him in person at the Coliseum. He was at the game. So it was nice for him to be able to travel out to California, his home state. But his left leg, or I guess I don't remember if it was left or right. It was stabilized pretty seriously. Like, he was walking with a really big limp. Like, the wrap that was on his leg that was covering whatever else is underneath there was like down to his ankle, and I imagine pretty high up his leg to sort of keep it as straight as it can. So that didn't seem very encouraging to me, that he would be able to return by the time the first playoff game starts. Maybe he gets back after that, but that's my read of the situation. Eric, I don't know if you have any other guesses or intuitions.
Well, his mom follows me on Twitter, and she comments a lot on just about everything I do, and she's commented about his injury. And I mean, just reading between the lines, it didn't sound like she's like, yeah, the rest of the season's done. It was like, yeah, you're going to miss this game, but there'll be other big games. But she didn't say if they were in this calendar year. Having somebody that sprayed my knee back in May, and that I'm 100 years older than Kingston. I mean, it's funny because it wasn't debilitating ever, but I thought, is this ever going to go away? And then one day it did. I mean, you deal with, when you get to the end part of it, it's just things tightening up and getting sore around the knee. And so he could play with that. It's just the aftershocks of it. So we'll see how quickly he heals, but for me, it just all of a sudden one day it was gone, and it was pretty amazing.
All right, another injury question is from
Bob. I'm ready to go for the playoff.
All right. Is another injury question from Bob Oxnard. Is Logan Thomas going to be healthy enough to help in the playoff?
He was credited with playing one play on defense in the game, so I'm assuming that he was, if they're healthy enough to roll him out. I'm going to see Tyler. Well, I looked
it up because I saw the question come in earlier. He played special teams against Virginia and Army. It didn't look like he played against USC, at least not that I'm seeing listed on his. Now, I don't even know if the special team snaps have been updated yet for PFF.
They have not. But he was listed as playing one snap on defense, unless they updated that and said, oh, it wasn't him, because I did the snap count story and he was in it.
Yeah, so he's been healthy. I just don't know that he's been someone that they think can make the impact defensively. Now maybe he can.
They had him play pass rush on one snap, according to PFF.
So maybe he can get in a position in a few weeks to be a better aid to the pass rush. But he has been healthy enough, at least
He's
special teams.
He is really good on special teams. I mean, he's one of the guys that Marty Biaggi brings up as somebody that they really value on special teams. So I think he would make a more of an impact there than playing that Viper position with Josh Burnham and Junior. Junior had a really good game. Junior graded out very well in that game. Tua Halamaka.
All right, let's dive deeper into the questions. We have a bunch of them, so forgive me for maybe not putting them in the best of order. Scott Fegan says, which position unit do you see peaking at this time, and which unit needs to make more strides?
I think the quarterback position is ascending. Notre Dame's up to 39th in passing efficiency, which is 90 spots higher than they were after the Northern Illinois game. The tight ends seem to be getting their stuff together. The cornerbacks, I'll tell you what, Leonard Moore needs to be a freshman All-American. I'd say the position group that I think needs to step up is the wide receivers. I have not been impressed with them as a group, with their consistency, and maybe not all of it's their fault, but I think the wide receivers need to step up.
Yeah, I would agree with you on the wide receivers. I think the tight end position is maybe peaking.
They certainly had a good game Saturday.
Yes. I think the running back group is peaking, even though that barring whatever injury situation
Right.
Jeremiah Love is dealing with, but beyond that, I think they're playing as well as they've played all season.
Jeremiah Love was a freaking man in the first half of that game. I mean, he set the tone. That was
and that was a continuation of what we'd seen in previous weeks. That wasn't just like a one half burst from Jeremiah Love.
Yeah, but he was punking those guys. I mean, that was wow. I mean, it wasn't just the speed. It was just, you're not taking me down. This isn't going to be a 2-yard run. This will be an 11-yard run. Sorry, USC. It was impressive.
Yeah, I think he's been doing that for a while. So, but I guess USC is a better defense than some of the defenses he'd been doing that against. Let's get into some other questions. Outbound, do we think that interception that Leonard threw was a miscommunication or just a bad read and throw?
He talked about it in the press conference, and he kind of was self-deprecating about it, said, yeah, the guys on the sideline said the guy could have called for a fair catch. It was so bad. I think it was just a bad read because I can't remember who the receiver was open.
Chris
they
Mitchell.
were open. Yeah, Mitchell. He was open like 10 yards down the field, and he just underthrew it and just must have misjudged where he thought Chris was going to be.
Well, I think the distance between the defender and Mitchell grew when the defender saw how short the ball was thrown. Because I
just kept running.
I did think it was a miscommunication from watching it from the press box. Like I thought Leonard thought Mitchell was going to be coming back to the ball. And then at the point where Leonard threw it, Mitchell keeps running. And then the defender's like, well, I don't care where Mitchell's going. The ball's over here. So Leonard has not thrown any criticism at his teammates at all. So I think even if it was a miscommunication, I don't know that he would necessarily tell us. So my guess is a miscommunication, but Leonard, who could have said that was the case, but he did not. He did not say that. All right. While
you're looking, somebody asked about the Notre Dame women in the Cayman Islands. I think whatever, they must have gotten some bad pineapple or something down there.
All right. Jeff Stevenson asks, who are the two most impactful players that didn't get snaps or finish at USC that ND needs back for the playoffs? I think we got to go
Yeah.
excluding the injured guys that we already talked about, because I think those are obvious answers.
Okay, so who are impactful guys that didn't get any snaps or finish at USC? And well, I guess he's alluding to the injured players.
Yeah, so I guess maybe we got to cut the list down to 2, and I think it's pretty obvious then.
Right, it would be Cross and Love, but if we're going beyond that, I mean, they'd love to have Mitch Jeter at 100% and kicking like he did when he was at South Carolina. I think they need to get. This kind of goes outside the boundaries of the question, but Bo Collins played 50-some snaps out of 62 and was targeted once and dropped it. I think they need more impact from the boundary receiver position if they're going to give him 55 snaps.
Yeah, and it didn't help that Jaden Thomas fumbled earlier in the game too. So that position was not contributing in the way you need it to. Certainly Kingston Viliamu-Asa would be nice, but I don't know that that's realistic.
Jordan Clark didn't have a good game. They need him to be back on his, but this is outside the context of that question. I'm just trying to put some names in here.
Yeah, and Clark
wasn't anybody they took off the field and said you're not playing. So
yeah, and Clark was dealing with, he missed some time with what I thought was a stinger based on his reaction, but
he did miss some time, and I think Hurd had to play nickel for a little bit.
Yeah, and so the big hit near the goal line was what dinged him up. All right. T. Dawson said, when is Marcus's next press conference where we will hear more about Howard Cross and J. Love? I think we covered that mostly, but Sunday would be the time that we would expect to talk to Marcus Freeman about football specific things. Certainly because of college football playoff announcements. Scott Fegan says, will finals get in the way of the first playoff game? And I'm sorry for saying you guys have a lot of questions and they're not all very
okay,
related.
I'll try to answer this while you're looking through the questions. I asked Pete Bavacqua about that. The finals, the schedule for finals way back in the spring for this fall was the week leading into that playoff game. That's when they were scheduled. And I said, what are you going to do? Because I know when the playoff schedule is. So what are you going to do about Notre Dame's finals? And he said, we're Notre Dame. So it's not like we're going to tell these guys they don't have to take finals. But he felt like at that time they'd be able to work something out. They'd either be able to take them early or later. I think they would take them early. And maybe even early that week so that they could. Now, the fact that they don't have to travel is huge because that buys them some time during that week. But that's generally, and when they have finals for bowl games, they practice in those weeks, but they're usually lighter practices and not as frequent. So that's certainly something we'll ask about on Sunday. But I remember that was his response to it. Did I buy you enough time there, Tyler? Now he's not even going to talk to us. He's going to put the mute button on and make us read his lips.
Sorry, I muted myself after clearing my throat into the mic so I could do it again, and then I forgot to unmute myself. So my apologies both for clearing my throat on mic and not unmuting myself after. Let's get to some of the other questions. Brent Welker says, been discussed on other pods. Is there smoke to Indy playing on Friday versus Saturday?
I don't know why there would be smoke. I mean, they haven't even put together the pairings or the seedings yet. So I'm not sure where the smoke would be coming from.
I think it's coming from people who have to prepare Notre Dame Stadium. I've heard that Friday is the date that they've been telling people to be prepared to work. So I think I don't know where else all the information is coming from, but that's I've heard Friday was the date that was going to be most likely for Notre Dame to play. Now, I don't know if that'll happen, but that's what I've heard. Brian Habermel says, is there any place that you know that tracks which teams start with the best field position at +16 in turnover ratio? ND starting field position should be good.
I think I can help you out here if Tyler can answer the question or get to the next question. I might be able to find that here.
Let me get to T. Dawson asking about what sideline plans for warmth will be available to players in the playoff game, just warming benches. Yeah, they have benches that are warming both for their helmets and for them to sit on. Sometimes they'll have the I don't even know what they're called, but they're just these heaters that blow out hot air, and sometimes you could put a glove in front of it and start a fire if you get something flammable close to it, because it's basically shooting fire out in terms of heat. But yeah, there'll be different things they could do. If it's really bad, they could even do stuff like chicken broth or like a warm soup or like warm liquid on the sidelines. I don't know particular to what Notre Dame likes to do as it relates to that, but those are some of the options that I imagine Notre Dame will have available if they so choose.
Okay, Notre Dame is 4th in that, and I'm going to give you the website. I'm going to type it in the comments here. Let me paste it in here.
All right, I'll bring the question back up so people know what we're talking about.
Okay, I just put the so it's in the comments, and you can pull it up if you want.
All right, bcftoys.com is the site, and that's Brian Fremo, I think is how you say the name.
Yeah.
And he works at Notre Dame.
Right, and he does a really cool analytics website with all kinds of rankings, but he does have the starting field positions and ranks them 1 through 134.
Outbound big salamanders. Yeah, I think those are what those are called. That's what you're talking about, right? Those the things that blow the hot air. I think the salamanders. I think that's what they're called. I think that's what Outbound's saying. Gary B asks, is all this Marcus Freeman to whatever NFL team just his agent trying to get him a better contract?
I think the agent is encouraged by I don't think he's the one stirring the pot, but he'd be like, yeah, that sounds good. Let's keep that going. I think this is a good timing for Marcus to get extended. And so I think it's not like Brian Kelly's agent, who was trying to do that toward the end of 2016, and it really kind of ticked people off.
All right. Bob Oxner asked, do you think we will see Bronte Johnson or another backup corner in the playoff to give our starting corners a bit of rest?
I wrote about that a little bit today in the snap count story. That's certainly the goal. They'd like to get the Tay Johnson and Carson Hobbs up to the point where they could take some more snaps. I mean, they played 79 snaps, and I'm talking they meaning Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. And Leonard Moore has been maxing out almost every game he's played. And so he's put a lot of tread on the tire in a very short period of time. And USC could bring receivers in waves at those guys. And that's when I started talking about those matchups, why Ole Miss was the most difficult matchup, because I think Ole Miss can do that, except even better than what USC did. And Ole Miss has a much better defense than USC's, except when they play average teams and then they fall apart.
Yeah, I don't know that they're going to get to that spot. I think that the closest they would get to that is if someone like Christian Gray is getting picked on and not having success, then maybe they can take him out for a series just to get him a series to clear his mind, or to maybe get some extra coaching while someone else is out there doing it.
You don't think Carson Hobbs can take some snaps during a playoff game?
No, I would not put Carson. If you aren't putting the Carson Hobbs on the field against Virginia, I don't know that you're putting him on the field against whoever you're playing against.
Well, I mean, everybody talks about these December practices are like another spring practice. That's what I'm saying. You can get reps to especially these young guys early before they know the opponent. I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just presenting.
Well, I
that.
mean, but like a spring practice, I think it would help towards next season and not this year, in my opinion, especially in a game that's your season's on the line. Like it's not the Sun Bowl.
Well, I'll tell you that rotation was tight at all the positions on defense on Saturday. That's the tightest. Defensive line tightened up too.
Yeah, they're not rolling deep, and that tells you who they have confidence in those big moments. And obviously, a playoff game would be as big of a moment as.
Fortunately, these are spaced out apart enough where you get
right.
Yeah,
you
shouldn't a little bit more recovery time, and they won't have school after the first playoff game.
Yeah, and they'll have the advantage of not having to play this coming weekend while the other teams have. Not all of them, but many of them. All right, let's get to there's one more question here that wasn't transfer portal related that I wanted to throw in here. T. Dawson, isn't it weird to think that there will be some playoff teams with 0 bowl wins while there may be others with multiple bowl game wins in the same postseason? Might make future bowl game stats odd.
Yeah, I think the bowl stats and all those records are already odd with all the opt-outs you see in the bowl games that aren't part of the playoff. I remember at the beginning of the year, and maybe this guy has a point now, but he was all over me for ranking Ohio State in the top 10 and not Missouri higher than Ohio State, since Missouri beat Ohio State in a bowl game with Ohio State playing like its 8th string quarterback and all these guys opting out. And so anyways, I just decided to rant for no reason.
Yeah, I just think, bowl game stats will be meaningless. No one's going to care about bowl games. Just playoff stats will matter.
At some point, people might say, what's a bowl game?
Outbound said, and this was earlier, so Outbound, thanks for mentioning it. There's been a lot of questions. Do you guys think the college football playoff will try to force Notre Dame to move to Indy if we get matched up with a beloved SEC team, depending on the weather?
No, the teams do have the
it's
option.
Up to the teams
home
to do that.
team
The playoff
has
can't
that
do
option.
That too.
Yeah, the playoff committee's not going to say, "Oh, you guys need to play in the Cayman Islands."
Yeah, they wouldn't have set up They'd be stupid to set up a format that allowed home games that say, "Well, no, actually, we don't want you to play the home game." And then, I don't know that Notre Dame and Jack Swarbrick would have agreed to this format if they weren't allowed to have the home game.
Penn State will probably have a home game too if they lose to Oregon.
Yeah,
so that'll be in lousy weather too, with a mascot that runs around.
All right. T. Dawson says, what's the likelihood that we get some transfer portal activity / announcement by any ND player prior to the first playoff game? Hope none.
This is going to be a new test because you had the 4-team playoffs and you didn't have much of that with the 4-team playoff. With the 12-team, you wonder, because of how long the playoff will go, and we're going to get into this, Tyler, I think, talking about this, but we might as well talk about it now, is the portal will close before the end of December. So before the semifinal or before even the quarterfinals are played, the portal closes. So will you have kids declare for the portal but stay on their teams? And there have been kids that have done that before for bowl games or for playoffs. They've declared for the transfer portal and put their name in, but they've had the team's blessing to play for that team until they were eliminated from whatever game they are. This is going to be a really interesting case with it being a 12-team playoff. Given Notre Dame's kind of team culture, I don't see a lot of guys going in unless they're so far down the, playing, food chain that they wouldn't play in the game anyways. And even then, it's hard to imagine them doing it. But then if Notre Dame wins the first playoff game, then it becomes really interesting if those guys want to go somewhere and be able to enroll in January. And a lot of schools will be in that position.
Yeah, it's difficult. The players can, if you're in the playoff, you can still, I believe this is still the case, you can still enter the portal after your team loses. You have a window that opens up after your team loses.
I did not know that.
I think that is still the case. I don't think you have to be in if you're on a playoff.
But even then, if you get to the semifinals, I mean, people have started school by then.
Right. Yeah. No, it makes it very difficult for that to work if you want to transfer mid-year. So I think there probably will be some guys that enter the portal before Notre Dame gets to the playoff. But I think those will be mostly players that aren't in a position to help Notre Dame play. So yeah, it's a tough situation. I think the school timing of it is the hard part, because like if you want to get in there for spring, I guess some schools may be more lenient than others too. So I guess it depends on the school that you're transferring to. So I think it's the college football has not figured out the right calendar yet. I don't know when or if they'll figure out something that makes more sense, because I don't think the current calendar makes a lot of sense. So it's a difficult situation to navigate. I guess maybe you could have guys enter the portal and just say, "Hey, do not contact me," just so people know that, hey, I'm gonna be transferring, but I want to stick with my team for the playoff. Maybe that would be an avenue you could explore, but I think even if you put the do not contact tag, I don't know that everyone follows that. So I think it would be hard to stay focused on your job and responsibilities at Notre Dame if you're in the transfer portal. Scott Fegan wants to know about players that Notre Dame may target. Do you see ND looking at some of the defensive tackles in the portal this year? Not sure how stacked that position is for next year. Sorry, excuse me. And then he also said, will Notre Dame look at receivers in the portal?
What I kind of sketched out the positions, I think some of this is going to depend. I mean, there's going to be surprises on outgoing transfers. I think Marcus has a pretty good handle on it, but there's always surprises, at least to us. I think interior defensive line, definitely. I think maybe edge players too on the defensive line, depending on the recovery time for both Jordan Botelho and Boubacar Traore. I think nickel, I think wide receiver, maybe a safety, maybe a tight end. If they feel like they need somebody that's more dynamic, kind of at the top of that rotation, and maybe some of what Eli's plans are as far as, I don't think he's NFL ready, but maybe he would. So those are the positions that come to mind for me without factoring in surprises.
Did you mention kicker?
Yes, I said kicker. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, I think I agree with all those. I do think tight end is a position that will be considered. I know that from reporting about covering this recruiting cycle at the tight end position, there's been a lot of back and forth on one or two tight ends in the class, and a lot of that conversation revolved around whether or not they felt the need to go after tight ends in the portal. So we'll see if that happens. But I think it may, because it looks like Notre Dame's only going to sign one tight end. So yeah, I think those are probably all the position groups. I think defensive tackle is the biggest need in terms of those position groups that we mentioned.
And you would say that, and I'm just making this clear, even if Anye and Rubio came back, you would say that, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I agree.
Now maybe those guys don't like that, and maybe they want to leave if that's the case. But I think it's something you would still need to entertain. All right. I think we've covered all the transfer portal stuff. Oh, Jeff Stevens asked, if an ND player declares for the portal, do they stay with the team?
I'm not sure that I understand the question, so you go first.
No, they don't stay with the team. Typically,
Well,
now they're
typically, again, with this playoff thing, that we don't know that though, right? Right. That's the newness of it. But in the past, no, they have not. They often stay in school, that like some of them
Oh yeah, almost
will
all of them
stay
stay
and
in
they'll
school.
get their degree. Well, I mean, even into the next semester, there's guys that will declare for the portal and they will then say, well, I'm going to get my degree first and then I will do my transfer. And they'll get the degree in the spring. I think that's what the defensive lineman from St. Louis is doing, isn't he?
Tyson Ford.
I think that was his plan.
I think even Jaden Mickey's staying through the spring to graduate as well.
Yeah, they could certainly use him in the playoff, and he wouldn't be damaging his redshirt status. But I know that would be not the thing to do.
Scott Fegan says, "Are you concerned about any coaches leaving after the year?"
I'm not concerned about it because great programs have coaches get offers, and that's just kind of the way of the world. So Marcus may be concerned about it, but I'm not. I think that people take a run at their coaches. They've got really good assistant coaches. I mean, why wouldn't they? So, and will some of them leave? Probably. I can't remember the last time any Notre Dame staff stayed intact from one year to the next, where it was everybody the same back. So, no, I think that there are people. I mean, Jared Parker got an offer last December. That was not something that I thought was going to happen.
Yeah, I think the thing that is most important is that the coordinators are probably not going anywhere. Now, maybe Al Golden gets lured away by an NFL position or something, but I think that's the starting point for Notre Dame, is that you feel comfortable with your coordinators, and then maybe some other guys get jobs to be coordinators elsewhere. That would be hard to turn down. All right, we got a bunch of Jeff Stevens questions from earlier. Given the move by Stanford to name Andrew Luck as the football GM, do you expect Notre Dame to hire a GM role? Can I recommend Bob Morton? I think he would be excellent.
Well, Bob Morton will have to arm wrestle Chad Bowden, who has the job.
Yeah.
But I would recommend Bob Morton for anything, and I think he would win most arm wrestling matches.
Is Tyler Buckner or another number 26 always in during punts? If not, isn't this a clear signal to the opposition that a fake punt is likely in the works?
There's always a 26 in on field goals because that's Chris Salerno. I don't think Chris Salerno's in on punts.
No, Chris Salerno, with all due respect to Chris Salerno, he is not.
But he came as a punter. I mean, he could be the punter.
Right, yeah, but I was laughing that he was not covering a punt.
Yeah.
Like, that's not Chris Salerno's strong suit.
Although Bob Oxnard had a good Chris Salerno story. Bob Oxnard's wife did.
So I think that I think it is like if a team would have noticed that, hey, that's Tyler Buckner over there, like something goofy is going on. The counter to that is like there is enough action within that play that I think even if you thought a fake punt was coming, that maybe that it still could have worked, because they had Jeremiah Love going one way and Tyler Buckner running one way and then Mitchell Evans leaking out the other way. So I think the idea is that even if they maybe catch on to it, you're still in a position to execute the play. All right. Jeff Stevens also asked, with the commitment of Eric Schmidt as a kicker, doesn't it represent an abrupt change from the recent comments from Marty Biaggi that Indy wanted to take experienced kickers from the portal?
I think they will still take an experienced kicker from the portal, and Schmidt will be a competitor and also a backup. I mean, they've had those bodies on campus. They just haven't been giving them scholarships recently beyond the starters. And especially if the scholarship limit is going to expand as expected beyond 85. Marie from Atlanta even came up with this idea. I think giving a high school kicker that was going to walk on in another school, a scholarship seems to make sense given what we're seeing play out here in the second half of the season with Mitch Jeter.
Yeah, I think this is just, if Marty Biaggi is given the opportunity to have more than one scholarship kicker, I think he would be silly to pass on that. So, like, sure, if you're going to let me have a high school guy too, I'd be happy to have that. So if there's a situation like Mitch Jeter can't make his field goals, then we have maybe someone we feel a little bit more confident in than what's played out for Notre Dame so far this season. All right. I think that is about it on the questions. Bob Oxford said maybe Chris Salerno has really deceptive speed.
They were saying that about Riley Leonard on TV during the game. A sneaky speed or whatever. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it's funny that people say that about Riley Leonard because it's like, don't you just watch everyone on film miss tackles and not understand why that's happening? I don't know.
Look that he has a 6 yard per carry average.
Yeah. All right, Eric, team me up. Let's do some recruiting talk before we get out of here.
Okay. The 3-day signing period opens up on Wednesday. Notre Dame has now 24 verbal commitments who are expected to sign. We just talked about Eric Schmidt. Do you want to give a little bit more information?
Yeah, I didn't really talk about him other than the philosophy. Eric Schmidt was a former preferred walk-on commit to Wisconsin, and he flipped his commitment today to Notre Dame. He made an official visit this past weekend, which is not a normal thing for someone to take an official visit when the team is playing on the other coast. But he spent time on campus on Saturday and Sunday with Marty Biaggi and Chad Bowden. We'll spend time with them more on Sunday than on Saturday, of course. He's rated
on fake punts.
Rated as a 3-star kicker by Rivals. Rivals won't release its kicker position rankings until January, so there's no position ranking for him. He's both a punter and kicker. Cole's Kicking has him as the number 1 punter in the 2025 class and the number 26 kicker. He was 10 of 13 on field goals. All 3 of his misses were from at least 49 yards, and he made a 55-yarder in a game. His net punting average was 46 yards, and 13 of his 24 punts were inside the 20. I think that might have been 25. I think I did a typo there. And then he also did kickoffs and had touchbacks on 70 of a 75 kickoffs. So a highly regarded kicker and punter, and more depth at those positions. So Notre Dame doesn't have to be as reliant on graduate transfers. And if the graduate transfer maybe doesn't work out, they have another good option to push them and compete moving forward.
And this gives him a chance too. He can kind of get his feet wet punting. James Rendell is coming back for 2025. He still has a chance to come back for 26, but there may be a time they get to the end of the James Rendell time and say, wow, this Schmidt kid can punt. He's a little bit older now, and we like him to be our starting punter. So there's a lot of options for Schmidt. I think that was a smart move for both Notre Dame and the kid.
Yep.
Okay, who is left on Notre Dame's target list for the 2025 class?
Yeah, I think it's really 2. You can include wide receiver Derek Meadows, but I don't really think that anything's happening there. And the 2 are linebacker Madden Faremo, who I think is actually trending towards USC now, and defensive tackle Jalen Wiggins, who seems likely to stick with his commitment to Florida, a couple of 4-star recruits. So barring a surprise, I think it's going to be more of a whimper to the finish line for Notre Dame here at the end, and not being able to close out some of these guys, and particularly disappointing with Faremo, who's someone that Notre Dame felt confident about for months in this recruiting process, but he just never pulled the trigger on a commitment. And it seems like he's going to end up staying closer to home rather than making the leap and heading out to Notre Dame. But we'll see. He hasn't made a decision yet. Obviously, we'll learn here soon what that decision is.
And so Notre Dame on Sunday, while Tyler was in California still, got a commitment from Chattanooga Chaston Smith, a 4-star cornerback. How good of a player is Chaston Smith, the 4th commitment in that class?
Yeah, he's the number 7 cornerback and number 89 overall per Rivals. I saw him at a Rivals camp earlier this year. Was impressed by him. He was coveted guy. Texas A&M, Clemson, South Carolina, Indiana were his other finalists. And it was someone that I didn't think that Notre Dame was necessarily going to get until Sunday. So a late recruiting win for Notre Dame, late being like it sort of wasn't that obvious that Notre Dame was going to get him. Obviously, it's still early in the 2026 cycle, so you got to hold on to him. He attended the Florida State game earlier this season, and just more evidence of how attractive Notre Dame is for defensive backs with Mike Mickens and the players that have been performing so well in the defensive backfield for Notre Dame. So another good get in the secondary and continued good recruiting by Mike Mickens.
And he's not allowed to play in the playoff game.
He's not, no. All right, folks. I don't think there's anything else. Outbound says, are we having a party when we win the national championship? You want to make plans for a party, Eric?
I'll go out for a beer with you guys if you're in town, and we'll do Snow Angels afterwards. How's that?
Snow Angels at Eric's house.
Snow Angel. Well, we'll go out for a beer. We'll have beer, wings, and Snow Angels. I'd be up for that.
Jeff Seedings, yes, there will be a show next week. We'll plan to be back next Monday to discuss Notre Dame's college football playoff matchup.
We've kind of committed to doing this every week, 52 weeks a year.
The
two of us are guest people.
Yeah, that's the idea. It might not always be Monday once we get into the off season, but we try to keep it on Mondays here while the season is still going. Now maybe we have to change that around holidays or the playoff schedule based on how long Notre Dame goes. But we'll let you guys know. But yeah, plan to hear from us weekly on YouTube, and then we'll try to keep the podcast as regular as possible as well. But the longer we talk, the less time you have to sign up for the Cyber Monday deal for InsideNDSports.com from Rivals. Use promo code RIVALS24 for 75% off the first year of an annual subscription to InsideNDSports.com.
That's about $25. You all can afford that.
Yeah.
If not, easy, beg Tyler for money.
Don't beg. But
I have that beg me for money.
All right. But we appreciate everyone tuning in tonight. If you're not subscribed to us here, make sure you hit the subscribe button, hit that like button as well, and have a great week.